But one farmer says, seems to me there was a tea party in Boston that was illegal too.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
We shall seek to establish and maintain a dollar which will not change its purchasing and debt-paying power during the succeeding generation.
As anguished shrieks rose up from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Government credit and government currency are really one and the same thing. A reserve of gold and a small reserve of silver.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Well, some people still think it's money.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Junius Maltby channel. Today is going to be somewhat different. It's going to be a reading as we've done in the past, where we read speeches, writings, pieces of literature. Today are the excerpt quotes from a critical documentary that I would recommend every viewer watch at the conclusion of this video. Aaron Rousseau's America, Freedom to Fascism. So at the conclusion of this video, this will kind of prep you for it as you join this discussion and listen to these quotes, because this represents the words that point us towards what is coming, what we have already endured, and the tyranny we are living under. The first quote: "In a time of deceit, simple truth-telling becomes a revolutionary act." I would encourage you to think of how these quotes pertain to us today. Think of censorship, how videos are pulled or flagged from YouTube, how people are discredited, criticized, alienated, marginalized, falsely accused, merely for speaking out, for speaking against the tyranny. I think I'm correct in saying that actually the ratification of the 16th Amendment regarding the federal income tax never really properly occurred. Senior United States District Court Judge James C. Fox, March 21st, 2003. "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." Amschel Meyer Rothschild. "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, a few years after authorizing the creation of the Federal Reserve. The only difference between a tax man and a taxidermist is that the taxidermist leaves the skin. Mark Twain. "The power to tax is the power to destroy." John Marshall, who helped shape American constitutional law and served as the fourth Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. "We can't be so fixated on our desire to preserve the rights of ordinary Americans." Former U.S. President Bill Clinton, USA Today, March 11, 1993. "The government is answering the question through our enforcement actions in the courts." Terry Lemons, IRS spokesman, referring to the question of whether or not there was a law regarding the income tax. "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." Johann Wolfgang van Goethe. 100% of what is collected through federal income taxes is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. The Grace Commission. "The provisions of the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation. Then why was the federal income tax instituted that year?" Supreme Court ruling, Stanton v. Baltic Mining. Transcripts from the prosecution of Irwin Schiff, Prosecutor. Objection irrelevant. Judge Dawson. Sustained. Irwin Schiff. The income tax is irrelevant? Judge Dawson. I will not allow the law in my courtroom. Irwin Schiff. But the Supreme Court said in the Cheek decision, interrupted by Judge Dawson, irrelevant, denied. Irwin Schiff again. The Supreme Court is irrelevant? Judge Dawson. Irrelevant, denied. Judge Dawson speaking to defendant Irwin Schiff. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. Michael Rupert. The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. Abraham Lincoln. It's important that whomever I pick is viewed as an independent person from politics. President Bush, referring to his decision on the new Federal Reserve Chairman. Now remember, the President does not pick the Federal Reserve Chairman. He picks from a list given to him by the Federal Reserve of whom he would be allowed to choose, a list of several names, so ultimately they pick the candidate. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Thomas Jefferson. In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. Alan Greenspan, Economic Consultant, 1967, before becoming Chairman of the Federal Reserve. Paper is poverty. It is only the ghost of money and not money itself. Thomas Jefferson. Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control whole continents. Who controls money can control the world. Henry Kissinger. I sincerely believe the banking institutions having the issuing power of money are more dangerous to liberty than standing armies. Thomas Jefferson. Now we can see a new world coming into view, a world in which there is very real prospect of a new world order. President Bush, 41. The new world order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down, but in the end run, around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. Council on Foreign Relations member Richard Gardner, 1974. We shall have world government, whether or not we like it. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by conquest or consent. Paul Warburg, Council on Foreign Relations member and architect of the Federal Reserve. In defense of world order, U.S. soldiers will have to kill and die. Arthur Schlesinger, Jr. In the January 7th issue of USA Today, former Secretary of Labor Robert B. Reich wrote, "The dirty little secret is that both houses of Congress are irrelevant." Reich pointed out that, quote, America's domestic policy is now being run by Alan Greenspan and the Federal Reserve, unquote, and, quote, America's foreign policy is now being run by the International Monetary Fund, unquote. He also noted that, quote, when the president decides to go to war, he no longer needs a declaration of war from Congress, unquote. Nationhood as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. Strobe Talbot, President Clinton's top foreign policy advisor. Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money, and with the flick of the pen they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. However, take it away from them, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear, and they ought to disappear, for this would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers, and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create money. Sir Josiah Stamp, director of the Bank of England in the 1920s, reputed to be the second wealthiest man in England at that time. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. David Rockefeller, Bilderberger, Trilateral Commission, and Council on Foreign Relations member and founder. The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise power from behind the scenes. Felix Frankfurter, Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford. The main purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations is promoting the disarmament of U.S. sovereignty and national independence, and submergence into an all-powerful one-world government. Chester Ward, Rear Admiral and former Navy Judge Advocate 1956 to 1960, and a CFR member for 15 years. They also wish for the disarmament of the American people. Always remember that. The disarming of the people is perhaps the last hurdle these one-world tyrannical maniacs have towards total domination of this continent and its people. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. President John F. Kennedy, referring to Freemasonry, April 27, 1961. President George W. Bush has signed executive orders giving him sole authority to impose martial law, suspend habeas corpus, and ignore the Posse Comitatus Act that prohibits deployment of U.S. troops on American streets. Under CAFTA, the sale of vitamins and health supplements will be illegal. Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation, control highways and seaports. 995 allows the government to seize and control the communication media. 997 allows the government to control over all electrical, power, gas, petroleum fuels, and minerals. 998 allows the government to seize all means of transportation, including personal cars, trucks, vehicles of any kind, and total control over highways, seaports, and waterways. 999 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. 1000 allows the government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. 1001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. 1002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. 1003 allows the government to take over all airports and aircraft, including commercial aircraft. Executive Order 1004 allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. Executive Order 1005 allows the government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. 1051 specifies the responsibility of the Office of Emergency Planning and gives authorization to put all executive orders into effect in times of increased international tensions and economic or financial crisis. Executive Order 11310 grants authority to the Department of Justice to enforce the plans set out in executive orders, to institute industrial support, to establish judicial and legislative liaison, to control all aliens, to operate penal and correctional institutions, and to advise and assist the President. Executive Order 11049 assigns emergency preparedness function to federal departments and agencies, consolidating operative executive orders issued over a 15-year period. Executive Order 11921 allows the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency to develop plans to establish control over the mechanisms of production and distribution of energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money in the United States financial institution in any undefined national emergency. It also provides that when a state of emergency is declared by the President, Congress cannot review the action for 6 months. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has broad powers in every aspect of the nation. House Resolution 1528, cynically named Safe Access to Drug Treatment and Child Protection Act, would compel people to spy on their family members and neighbors and even go undercover and wear a wire if needed. Many people falsely believe that wiretapping has been implemented as a result of 9/11 and increased security since that event. Not true. Echelon was implemented and widely used during Clinton's administration to impose domestic surveillance. In 2002, the Pentagon said that they were a few years away from finishing the development and implementation of a massive database to monitor every purchase made by every American citizen. Clinton Eugene Curtis, a computer programmer, testified before the House Reps that it is possible to rig an election when using electronic voting machines, and he had personally written a program that did just that. Voting machines are error-prone and easy to hack. Additionally, the manufacturers don't allow their source code to be viewed. 2004 Ohio precinct-level exit poll data show virtually irrefutable evidence of vote miscount. The Government Accountability Office has issued a report that states, quote, "The integrity of the 2006 elections cannot be ensured. Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything." Joseph Stalin, communist leader of the Soviet Union. In closing, I'm including very simple words from the Constitution and the original Coinage Act. Here is all the Constitution says about the money power of the government from Article 1, Section 8. There is, Congress shall have power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin. And from Section 10, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. That is 27 words. The Congress shall have power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, not private central bankers. And we won't get into the entire Coinage Act of 1792, but here are some excerpts from it, only mentioning gold, silver, and copper, and the weights thereof, and going as far as to limit the amount of copper that could be minted so as not to dilute the value and circulation of currency. But my favorite part of the entire Coinage Act, "And be it further enacted, that if any of the gold or silver coins which shall be struck or coined at the said mint shall be debased or made worse as to the proportion of fine gold or fine silver therein contained, or shall be of less weight or value than the same, ought to be pursuant to the directions of this Act, through the default or with the connivance of any of the officers or persons who shall be employed at the said mint, for the purpose of profit or gain, or otherwise with a fraudulent intent, and if any of the said officers or persons shall embezzle any of the metals which shall at any time be committed to their charge for the purpose of being coined, or any of the coins which shall be struck or coined at the said mint, every such officer or person who shall commit any or either of the said offenses shall be deemed guilty of felony and shall suffer death. Every such officer or person who shall commit any or either of the said offenses shall be deemed guilty of felony and shall suffer death." We have seen what they laid out in the Constitution as how money should be created and who should have the power to do so. We have seen what that money should be made of, as deemed by the founders. And we've also seen what the punishment is for those who dilute or steal and rob from the treasury by any means. Thanks for being part of the Junius Maltby channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And go ahead and visit the Teespring link down below if you're interested in any of the Junius Maltby attire. The most boring outfit you'll ever wear.